simplistic situation. And I think that we need to begin to learn this. First question is, does climate change affect the loop current? To the north, high change of red This microphone's acting up. Okay, I'll just try and get through it. Where is the loop current this year?
I asked my physical astronomy colleague just last week, and she doesn't know right now. It takes a while to look through the data to figure it out, so we don't know right now where the loop current is. But the question of climate, will the climate change affect the loop current? We don't even understand right now why it shifts around from year to year. So at the present time, we can't really say. I would imagine at some point when climate change gets extreme, it almost certainly will, but right now we can't really say for sure that, the kind of climate change we're going to see over the next 50 years, we can't really say if it's going to affect the loop current or not. Not enough is known about it.
Does phosphate mining have much to do with this?
Well, remember I said the West Coast is already naturally phosphorus enriched, so it's nitrogen limited. So adding more phosphorus is really not going to make the red tide worse. It's when you add more nitrogen that you cause the red tide to get worse. And again, that water coming down the Coos River from Lake Okeechobee, that is really rich in nitrogen.
Has there been any discovery of BMAA in plant growth?
Yes, I have looked at great detail, but yeah, if you irrigate your crops from, say, Lake Okeechobee or small lake, but it's got blooms of blue-green algae, yeah, people have documented that BMA does get into those agricultural crops. It can get into your food that way, yes.
Can we metabolize BMA, or does it only accumulate?
Not enough studies have been done to really see if we can get rid of it, but we do know it does accumulate. Yeah. In fact, people have done studies now. If you feed BMAA to monkeys, they accumulate the BMAA in their brain, and you start to see those protein tangles, which are characteristic of neurodegenerative diseases.
This person says that they're very concerned about the neurotoxins in the air. From a 30-minute walk at the beach, I feel negative effects. Is that bad? Should I go away from the beach?
Okay, when they're walking on the beach, was this during, I'm guessing this was probably more like a red tide.
This past week, couple weeks.
And it was a blue-green algae bloom on the beach, or you didn't see anything? Excuse me?
There's a blue-green algae right now.
So there was a blue-green algae bloom on that beach?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I would recommend getting away from that beach, yeah.
It's Lynchville walleye.
Okay, yeah, we know there's toxins in Lynchville walleye, yeah. So yeah, you want to avoid that, yes.
We're having problems over here with infrastructure that's inadequate and failing. And we've been experiencing sewage dumps. This question is related to the sewage dump of 2016 in Pinellas County. Dumped 55 million gallons of sewage in the, I presume, I can't read, Sarasota Bay or Tampa Bay? Okay. Was that a cause of the blue-green algae and red tide?
Well, I really can't say, but I just looked at the data to see. Certainly you're adding more nutrients to Tampa Bay, it's going to make things worse. Now, whether you could connect it to a particular bloom of blue-green algae in Tampa Bay, I don't know. Probably not the red tide, because the red tide is more offshore. Red tide tends to be more offshore, and they could get washed into Tampa Bay. Now, if you did enrich, add more nutrients to Tampa Bay, and then the red tide makes it into the bay, it could make it worse. But it would not have initiated red tide.
Is there a test that our physicians can use to determine the amount of BMA in our brains or in our bodies?
not at the present time. We can only do the autopsies. After the person's died, you can analyze for the VMA in the brain. Unless, of course, you want to contribute a few ounces in your brain, while it's still alive, I suppose, we could do the test.
Some of these I can't read. Does herbicide spraying have effects on red tide or algae blooms?
Well, probably not red tide, because it's, again, offshore, but I guess there's been a lot of concern about the blooms of blue-green algae in Lake Okeechobee. And a number of people told me they seem to think there's a connection between the dumping of Roundup into Lake Okeechobee and the blue-green algae blooms there. There's not a direct connection because there is nitrogen and phosphorus in the glyphosate, which is the chemical in Roundup. But you do the calculation, the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and the amount of Roundup they add to the lake is minuscule compared to all the nitrogen and phosphorus coming in from the agricultural fields surrounding the lake. So it's not a direct cause. However, when you add it, I mean, the whole purpose of adding Roundup is they're killing off the floating vegetation, the water hyacinth and so on. So in those conditions, the water hyacinth is competing with the blue-green algae for the nutrients, plus they're floating at the surface, so they tend to shade the blue-green algae. So basically, they can outcompete the blue-green algae. When you use Roundup to kill off the water hyacinth die, they decompose, releasing all their nutrients. That gives you a huge slug of nutrients, and now the blue-green algae don't have any competition. They have more light, more nutrients, and so that certainly can lead to worse blooms of blue-green algae. Yeah.
We're having an active blue-green algae bloom in Sarasota Bay. Does it permanently remain in the water column?
Pretty much, yeah. It's just, you always have these blue-green algae around. The problem is not the algae per se, their presence, they're always around. It's the excess abundance. Okay. So, again, you always have low abundance of toxic algae, just not enough to create a problem. It's when you throw in a lot of nutrients that you get this excess abundance. Now, the other part to this, however, is most of these blue-green algae, they produce little gas bubbles. So they can float to the surface or they can sink down. So the problem is, like last summer, they float on certain circumstances, they float to the surface, you get this thick scum, and start smelling bad and everything. That's what people see. But for example, the last few months I've been sampling the Clusatch River, Lake Okeechobee. They're still there. They're just not forming that sort of scum. They've sunk down into the water column. A lot of times they'll sit on the bottom. If it's shallow water, they can sit on the bottom, get enough light and nutrients from the sediments, and so people think that everything's fine. But then, under certain circumstances, they start producing these gas bubbles, float to the surface. That's when people see it and start complaining. But you should, just because you don't see that surface scum doesn't mean the blue-green algae are not there. You just don't see them.
This person asked two questions. I'm going to ask the second one first because we hear about it all the time. How do you plainly and simply respond to the claim that red tide is just natural? This is the narrative that has been continuously pushed out here to the public.
That is half true. I mean, yes, it does naturally occur. I mean, you go back 500 years ago, the early Spanish explorers, they learned from the Native Americans here that you don't eat the shellfish in the fall months because they're likely to be toxic and so on. So there's good evidence is around for at least 500 years, probably many thousands of years, whatever, okay? And so yeah, if you live here on the West Coast, you have to expect to get hit with red tide on occasion. Now, I simply argue that all the anthropogenic nutrients we're dumping into the Gulf now are just making it much worse. I estimate roughly 15-fold higher abundance. That means 15 times more toxins that people are exposed to than we had in the past.
Their first question is, how does animal agriculture, husbandry, I presume, affect these algal blooms?
Well, they produce sewage just like we do. So yeah, I mean, north of Lake Okeechobee, you have these large dairy farms and cattle ranches and so on, and so all their feces is nutrient rich. It's washing into Lake Okeechobee and then down the Clusatch River, yes.
Are you doing any research on blue holes? Is that the question here? Is the person that wrote this?
Yes, that's the question.
No, not really. I mean, I guess a long time ago I did investigate some of the submarine springs, including some of these large holes offshore on the West Florida shelf. So, in other words, in addition to your, I mean, what we can easily quantify is their surface runoff down in the rivers and so on. But a lot of these nutrients are going into the groundwater and then coming back up. And well, think of the springs in Central Florida. If you look at the data in the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, the concentration of nitrogen in the groundwater has increased like 20-fold. And that's why those springs up there in Central Florida are turning green. Florida State was having this crystal clear springs, and now they're turning green. It's because all the nutrients going into the groundwater.
What should our government be doing to help reduce red tide and green algae?
You need to reduce the nutrient source. The way I look at it is, if I take my garbage and dump it across the fence into my neighbor's yard, my neighbor's not going to be too happy. They're going to call the cops or sue me or something. And yet our government allows agribusiness to dump all their nutrient-rich waste into our public waterways, downstream to our coastwaters, and it's the people downstream who suffer the consequences. So unfortunately, agribusiness is one of the major contributors of money to the politicians who make these decisions.
Is there a way for us to detoxify ourselves from BMAA?
No. That's the whole problem. It gets embedded in your proteins, they get tangled up, and you're stuck with it.
Is there a potential for a dead zone west of us in the Gulf, similar to, across the shelf
Right.
that Florida has, that would be similar to what's in Texas?
Yeah, well, the two largest blooms we've had was the one in 2000 that went from, when the 4 hurricanes hit Florida, we had a really intense red tide from late 2004 to early 2006. Large areas of West Florida shelf did go anaerobic. And at that point, not only do you have the neurotoxin killing things, but now just the lack of oxygen kills off stuff. So you have massive die-off on the West Florida shelf during that. And by the same thing this past summer, you had an intense enough bloom that a large area of the shelf went anaerobic, killing off lots of things. Like you've probably heard a lot about the stone crabs been wiped out and so on.
Does your research include wetland destruction and deforestation, and how does that affect runoff?
Well, I don't do research on that myself, but yeah, it's well established that wetlands are a nutrient sink. They're really good at cleaning up the water, taking out the nutrients. So when you destroy those wetlands, you tend to turn them into a nutrient source. And so it definitely leads to more nutrients running downstream. Deforestation, the same thing. Because on top of that, with deforestation, you get more soil erosion. Again, the soil is rich in nutrients.
Is there a website where this information is available, and what can we do now?
No, I personally do not have a website. I had some of this information on some websites a long time ago, and there was a battle I kept getting taken down, so I've sort of given up on that. What can you do? Well, I mean, personally, obviously, use either no fertilizer or as little fertilizer as possible in your own yard and so on. Unfortunately, I mean, it's mostly large things like agribusiness. It's really more of a political problem. So I mean, it's really more educate yourself. And of course, the problem I'm having here is I'm preaching to the choir here. The people who come to talks like this, the people are already aware of these issues and so on. But basically, educate people and vote.
Well, of course, things like using native plants that are adapted to the biochemistry of the environment.
So you don't have to have fertilizer,
Right.
don't have to water it. So
My favorite statement is what your life was like in your lawn and shrubs are like in Connecticut doesn't work here. The only way you can grow those things is to feed them because our soil is so different. And that's a major thing. And again, the majority of people here, I think, are well into that. We're closing in. There are a couple of questions here I can't read well, unfortunately. And we've covered mosaic, which is one of the questions here. I am going to post this meeting on the CONA website, and it'll be on the blog that Tom Matrula runs. And we've also filmed a conversation with Larry and Steve Swa here tonight, which will be posted as well. And you can continue to pursue these issues and try and, my view is, we need our legislators, our city commissions, our county commissions, our state representatives and senators to begin to focus on stopping this issue, not just dealing with the worst blooms. That's what's going on right now, and that's why most of us are very concerned. And thank you very much for coming.